When it comes to relationships, most people are trained to watch actions. Actions speak louder than words, they say. And yes, that's often true. But here's the hidden danger. Words don't just speak, they reveal. A man can act charming, attentive, and even loving for a long time. He can bring flowers, plan dinners, and say the right things when the timing suits him. But eventually his true character leaks out, not in grand gestures, but in the small, casual phrases he throws into conversations. The offhand comments, the careless statements, the things he says when he thinks you're not really listening, or when he believes he's safe enough to show his real thoughts. That's why words are warnings. They are signals, alarms, little flashes of red that tell you more than his actions ever could. Actions can be rehearsed, they can be staged. A man can play the role of perfect partner for months, even years. But words, those slip through the cracks, they come out raw, unfiltered, and often carry the truth he can't hide forever. Think about it, how many women have stayed in relationships because the man acted right in public, but spoke destruction in private. He may have opened doors, posted sweet photos online, or smiled around friends and family. But behind closed doors, his words cut, dismissed, or controlled. That's the contradiction so many people miss. They hold on to actions and ignore the words. And later, they wonder why their relationship collapsed under the weight of manipulation and disrespect. It's because words plant seeds. Every phrase he uses shapes the way you feel about yourself, about him, and about the relationship. Words can lift you, build your confidence, remind you of your worth, or they can slowly erode it. 1, you're overreacting here. 1, you're too sensitive there, and suddenly you start doubting your own emotions. You start asking yourself if maybe he's right, maybe you are the problem, maybe you are hard to love. And when you reach that point, he doesn't even have to control you anymore. You're controlling yourself, shrinking yourself to fit his comfort zone. That's the power of words. They don't just express, they shape reality. They can frame the entire relationship dynamic without you realizing it. And the worst part, the words that should have been taken as warnings in the beginning are often brushed off as just jokes, or didn't mean it that way. But deep down, you know he did mean it. Words reveal mindset, and mindset predicts behavior. Now here's the truth nobody likes to face. Every man tells you exactly who he is. Maybe not with a confession, maybe not with a big dramatic scene, but with the words he uses. He'll reveal how he views women, how he values respect, how he handles conflict, how he sees you. It might be in the way he argues. It might be in how he responds when you set a boundary. It might even be in a quiet moment, when you share something vulnerable and his response either honors it or diminishes it. When a man says something dismissive, manipulative, or controlling, you don't need to wait for proof. You already have the proof. His words are the proof. Yet too often, people try to excuse them away. He was stressed. He didn't mean it like that. It was just one time. But you have to ask yourself, what kind of man chooses those words in that moment? What do they reveal about the way he thinks? Because words aren't accidents. They come from beliefs. And beliefs shape how he will treat you in the long run. Imagine you're walking into a house. The paint is fresh, the furniture is beautiful, the candles are lit, everything looks perfect. But as you step in, you hear faint creaks in the floorboards or notice the sound of termites under the wood. Do you ignore it because the house looks nice? Or do you recognize that sound for what it is, a warning? That's what his words are. The creaks, the termites, the truth underneath the surface. You can choose to ignore it, but eventually the entire structure will collapse. This is why you must pay attention early. Because every word is either building you up or tearing you down. Every phrase is either guiding you closer to love or warning you about danger. And once you understand that, you stop ignoring the alarms. You stop making excuses for behavior that has already revealed itself. Think about how many women have stayed too long telling themselves, well, he never hit me, so maybe it's not that bad. But words don't leave bruises you can see, they leave scars on your self-esteem, your confidence, your ability to trust yourself. And in many ways, those scars run deeper, because physical wounds can heal, but the echo of his words can live in your mind for years. That's why the most dangerous relationships aren't always the ones where the actions are violent. They're the ones where the words slowly strip you of your strength. So, when I say words are warnings, I don't mean they might be, they always are. If a man tells you directly or indirectly that your feelings don't matter, that your love is conditional, that no one else would want you, that you're too sensitive, or that he refuses to grow, you must believe him. Don't wait for the action to follow. Don't wait for the situation to get worse. His words already told you what's coming. And here's the most empowering part. Once you learn to listen for these warnings, you gain control. You stop being blindsided. You stop falling into traps. You start making choices from clarity instead of confusion. Because instead of asking, did he mean it? You'll know, he just showed me who he is. And once you see it, you have the power to walk away before the damage is done. Words are not harmless. Words are not jokes. Words are not accidents. Words are the earliest warnings you will ever get. The question is, will you listen? One of the most dangerous things in any relationship is not the obvious red flags, the ones that scream at you right away. It's the subtle ones, the quiet manipulation that sneaks into your mind almost unnoticed and starts to shape the way you think, the way you feel, and even the way you see yourself. And often, this manipulation doesn't come with shouting or anger. It comes disguised as love, as concern, or even as truth. But don't be fooled. Some of the most destructive men don't break you with fists. They break you with words that twist and distort reality until you can't even trust your own judgment anymore. Here's how subtle manipulation works. He takes something pure, something genuine, something that should be freely given, like your love, your trust, your vulnerability, and he uses it as leverage. He turns it into a bargaining chip. He'll say things like, "If you loved me, you would do this for me." At first, it sounds harmless. Maybe you even think, well, that's true. If I love him, shouldn't I want to make him happy? But that's the trap. Because true love doesn't demand proof. It doesn't twist your feelings into obligations. It doesn't corner you into sacrificing your peace, your values, or your boundaries just to show that your love is real. Manipulation always plays on your goodness. It works because you do love, because you do care, because you do want to make things work. He knows you're compassionate, he knows you're empathetic, and he uses that against you. That's why it's so subtle, so effective, and so dangerous. Because it doesn't come as an obvious attack, it comes as a guilt trip, as a suggestion, as a condition that feels like it might be reasonable in the moment. But here's what you have to realize: anytime someone attaches conditions to your love, they're not interested in partnership, they're interested in control. A healthy man doesn't say, "If you loved me, you would." A healthy man says, "I love you, so I respect you." That's the difference. Manipulation asks you to give more, to prove more, to sacrifice more, while the manipulator gives less and less. Real love asks for nothing but respect, trust, and growth. The trick of subtle manipulation is that it doesn't always sound harsh. Sometimes it's wrapped in sweetness, in flattery, in the idea of closeness. He might say, "I just want us to be closer, so why don't you?" Or, "I just think if you really cared, you would understand." Do you see what happened there? He's framing his wants as your responsibility. He's shifting the weight of the relationship entirely onto your shoulders. Now, it's not about his lack of effort. It's about whether you're doing enough. And when you fall for this long enough, you start to believe that maybe you are the problem. Maybe you're not loving enough. Maybe you're not trying hard enough. That's the slow poison of manipulation. It doesn't attack you head on. It changes the story in your mind until you're carrying guilt that was never yours to carry. You start apologizing for things you didn't do. You start working harder to meet standards that were never fair in the first place. And worst of all, you start ignoring the truth you already know deep inside, that love should not feel like this. Let me tell you something important: manipulation thrives in silence. It grows when you second guess yourself instead of calling it out. It deepens when you convince yourself that maybe it's just his way of loving. But deep down, you know love doesn't feel like a test you can fail. Love doesn't feel like a courtroom where you have to present evidence of your loyalty. Love doesn't feel like a constant negotiation where you're always giving and he's always taking. And here's the real cost of letting subtle manipulation continue. It doesn't just control you in the moment, it reshapes the way you see love itself. After years of hearing, "If you loved me, you would," you start to believe that real love is sacrifice without limits. You start to believe that boundaries are selfish. You start to believe that giving up pieces of yourself is normal, even necessary, to keep a relationship alive. That's how powerful manipulation is. It can make you abandon your own sense of what's right just to keep someone else satisfied. But you don't have to live like that. You don't have to hand over your self-worth just because someone wrapped their control in the disguise of love. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to reject conditions. You are allowed to stand in the truth that real love honors your freedom. It doesn't steal it. Real love encourages your individuality. It doesn't erase it. Real love grows alongside you. It doesn't force you to shrink so someone else can feel bigger. Here's the test: if you feel smaller after his words, it's not love. If you feel guilty for having needs, it's not love. If you feel like you're constantly proving yourself, constantly earning the right to stay, constantly giving more while receiving less, it's not love. That's manipulation. And the moment you recognize it for what it is, you take back your power. Because the manipulator's strength only exists when you believe his lies. Once you see the game is over. Once you recognize the pattern, you can walk away before it destroys your confidence. And walking away doesn't mean you failed the relationship. Walking away means you refuse to fail yourself. You see, love doesn't keep score. Love doesn't hang your worth on conditions. Love doesn't demand that you lose yourself to keep someone else happy. Manipulation does. And once you know the difference, you'll never mistake one for the other again. One of the most important yet often overlooked elements of a healthy relationship is emotional safety. We talk so much about physical attraction, chemistry, financial stability, or even shared values, but all of those things mean very little if you don't feel safe in the relationship. And when I say safe, I don't just mean physically, I mean emotionally. Because the truth is, if your emotions are not protected, everything else crumbles. You cannot thrive, you cannot love freely, and you cannot grow in a relationship where you are constantly questioning if your feelings are valid, respected, or even heard. Emotional safety is the invisible foundation that holds love together. It's not something you can see like gifts or gestures, but it's something you feel every single day. It's in the way he listens when you speak. It's in how he responds when you're upset. It's in whether he values your emotions as much as his own. And here's the reality. A man who cannot create emotional safety is a man who cannot give you true love. Because love without safety is just a performance. It's a mask, a surface-level illusion that might feel good for a while, but eventually it leaves you empty and broken. Think about this: when you share something vulnerable, you are giving him a piece of your soul. You are saying, here is my heart, here are my fears, here are my wounds. And what he does in that moment will tell you everything you need to know. If he listens, if he validates, if he protects that vulnerability, he is showing you that your emotions are safe with him. But if he mocks, dismisses, or weaponizes what you shared, he is telling you loud and clear that you are not safe in his hands. And if you are not safe, you will never be truly loved. The danger comes when women ignore these signals. When he laughs at your tears and says, you're overreacting. When he brushes off your boundaries and says, you're too sensitive. When he takes the very things that matter most to you and twists them into flaws. Those are not just words, those are warnings. They are signs that emotional safety does not exist in that relationship. And without emotional safety, the relationship becomes a place of fear, doubt, and constant self-questioning. You know what happens when you don't feel safe emotionally? You start to shrink. You stop sharing what you feel, because what's the point? Every time you do, it's thrown back at you, minimized or ignored. You stop asking for what you need because you already know the answer will be turned against you. You silence yourself to keep the peace, thinking that maybe if you stay quiet, maybe if you stop bringing it up, maybe if you carry the weight alone, the relationship will somehow work. But what you don't realize in that moment is that you're slowly losing yourself. You're sacrificing your voice, your truth, your needs, all for a relationship that isn't protecting your heart in return. And here's the heartbreaking part. Many women get so used to this lack of safety that they start to believe it's normal. They start to think, maybe I am too emotional. Maybe I do expect too much. Maybe I should toughen up. No, that is manipulation talking. That is what happens when someone has made you question your own worth to the point where you think you don't deserve better. But the truth is, you do. You deserve to be in a relationship where your emotions are not just tolerated but cherished, where your tears are not mocked but comforted, where your boundaries are not treated as obstacles but as evidence of your value. A man who truly loves you will never make you feel foolish for having feelings. He will never use your vulnerability as a weapon. He will never dismiss the parts of you that make you human. On the contrary, he will see those moments as opportunities to show up for you, to protect you, to create a space where you feel more free, more open, more loved. That's what emotional safety feels like. It's the freedom to be fully yourself without fear of punishment, judgment, or manipulation. So let's be clear: if a man is constantly making you feel unsafe emotionally, if you walk on eggshells around him, if you hesitate to express yourself because you know it will be turned against you, that is not love. That is control. That is selfishness. That is the foundation of a toxic relationship that will only drain you more the longer you stay. And the tragedy is not just what he does to you, it's what you end up doing to yourself. Because eventually, you will start censoring your own heart. You will build walls around yourself, not because you want to, but because you have been trained to believe your emotions are a burden. But imagine the opposite. Imagine being in a relationship where you can cry without shame, where you can express frustration without being labeled crazy, where you can share your dreams without being laughed at. Imagine being with someone who doesn't just tolerate your emotions, but respects them, honors them, and treats them as part of the sacred bond between you. That is emotional safety. And once you experience it, you'll never settle for less again. So here's the truth: emotional safety is not optional. It's not extra. It's not something you get if you're lucky. It is the core of love. Without it, the relationship will become a slow death of your spirit. With it, the relationship can become the most empowering, healing, and joyful experience of your life. And that's why you must pay attention to the words he uses, the way he handles your emotions, the way he treats your heart when it's vulnerable. Because those are the signs that tell you if you are safe or if you need to walk away. And the moment you recognize that your emotions are not protected, you don't have to wait for more proof. You already have it. Your heart is not safe there. And the most powerful decision you can ever make is to leave before you lose yourself. Every healthy relationship has boundaries, and every strong woman knows that boundaries are not walls, they are doors. They are not about keeping people out. They are about letting the right people in while protecting yourself from harm. A boundary is simply the line that says, this is who I am. This is what I value. This is how I expect to be treated. And here's the truth. If a man dismisses or disrespects those boundaries with his words, you are already seeing the future of that relationship. Because how he reacts to your limits tells you everything about how he sees you, how he values you, and how much respect he is capable of giving. Think about it. Every relationship is tested the moment one person says no. That's when the mask comes off. Anybody can act loving when you're giving them everything they want. Anybody can be charming when you're saying yes all the time. But the real test is what happens when you say, I don't like that, or that doesn't feel right to me, or that's not how I want to be treated. If his response is to mock you, belittle you, or pressure you, then he is showing you he doesn't respect your boundaries, and by extension, he doesn't respect you. Words like, you're too uptight, or why are you making such a big deal out of this, or even, if you really cared, you'd just let this go, are all designed to push you past your own limits. Those aren't harmless phrases. Those are tests. Those are his way of saying, your needs don't matter as much as my comfort. And once you accept that, even once, you've trained him that your boundaries are negotiable, that your limits can be bent, that your self-respect can be persuaded away with enough guilt or pressure. But here's the thing, boundaries don't destroy love, they protect it. They are not punishments, they are protections. They keep the relationship healthy by setting clear expectations about what is acceptable and what is not, and a man who truly loves you will never be offended by your boundaries. He may not always agree with them, but he will honor them because he understands that without respect, there is no love. The danger comes when women start to believe that boundaries are too much. When you start thinking, maybe I am being difficult, maybe I should just let it slide, maybe I shouldn't make him uncomfortable. But let me ask you, why should your comfort be sacrificed so his can be preserved? Why should your voice go silent just so his can be louder? That's not balance, that's control. And if you ignore it long enough, you'll find yourself in a relationship where you're constantly bending, constantly adjusting, constantly giving up parts of yourself just to keep the peace. That's not love, that's self-erasure. Boundaries are not selfish, they are acts of self-love. When you say, this is not okay with me, you are not pushing someone away. You are giving them the chance to step up. You are giving them the chance to rise to the level of respect that love requires. And if they can't, then they're not the right person for you, because love without respect is just possession. It's not partnership, it's ownership. And no amount of affection or attraction can survive in a space where your limits are constantly violated. Now here's where the subtle danger lies. A man who doesn't respect boundaries won't always come out and say, I don't care about your limits. No, he'll be smoother than that. He'll laugh it off as if you're just being dramatic. He'll try to guilt you into changing your mind. He'll say things like, you're being too sensitive, or why are you always so serious? Those words may sound light, but they carry a heavy message. Your boundaries are not valid. And once you start believing that, you've lost the foundation of self-respect that every healthy relationship is built on. The way a man responds to your boundaries is a mirror. It reflects his maturity, his respect, and his true character. If he leans in, if he says, I hear you, if he adjusts his behavior to honor what you've asked for, that's love, that's partnership. But if he rolls his eyes, if he makes you feel guilty, if he tries to argue you out of your own truth, that's a warning. That's not love. That's control disguised as care. Here's the truth. Every time you let a boundary be broken, you teach him how to treat you. If you let disrespect slide once, you'll see it again. If you accept being dismissed once, you'll be dismissed again. Love isn't about how someone treats you when everything is easy. It's about how they treat you when you draw the line. And if he can't handle your no, he doesn't deserve your whys. Boundaries are not just about protecting you from harm, they're about preserving your dignity. They remind both of you that love is not about ownership, it's about choice. That you are not there to be controlled, but to be cherished. And if a man's words reveal that he sees your boundaries as obstacles instead of guideposts, then you already know the ending of that story. You already know that staying will cost you more than leaving ever could. So, don't apologize for your boundaries. Don't shrink them to make someone else comfortable. Don't let anyone convince you that love means surrendering the very lines that keep you whole. Because the moment you do, you start being a partner and start being a prisoner. And that is never the love you deserve. The truth is simple, a man who respects you will respect your boundaries. A man who doesn't respect you will try to erase them. His words will tell you exactly which one he is. The only question is whether you will listen. The hardest truth in any relationship is not recognizing the red flags, it's admitting the cost of ignoring them. Walking away is painful, yes, but staying often costs you far more than leaving ever will. Because every day you choose to remain in a relationship where words are toxic, where boundaries are dismissed, where emotional safety is absent. You are trading pieces of yourself for the illusion of love, and those pieces don't come back easily. At first, the cost of staying doesn't look obvious. Maybe he says something cruel, but he apologizes quickly. Maybe he dismisses your feelings, but then he does something sweet to make up for it. You convince yourself it's just a bad moment, not a pattern. You tell yourself every relationship has ups and downs, and you don't want to be the one who gives up too soon. So you stay, you excuse, you rationalize. And little by little, the cost starts to build quietly, silently, in ways you don't even see at first. The first thing you lose is your confidence. You start to doubt yourself. You start to believe his words more than your own instincts. When he says, "You're overreacting," you second guess whether you actually are. When he says, "You're too sensitive," you wonder if maybe you really should toughen up. And slowly, the voice inside you, the one that used to be strong, clear, and steady, gets quieter. You no longer trust your feelings. You no longer trust your judgment. And once he has that, once your self-confidence is chipped away, he has more control than you realize. The second thing you lose is time. Time is the one resource you can never get back. Every day spent in a relationship that diminishes you is a day you could have spent building joy, building peace, building the life you deserve. But instead, you spend it managing his moods, soothing his ego, repairing the damage of his words, hoping tomorrow will be different. Months pass, years pass, and then one day you look back and realize you've been holding on to someone who never intended to grow, never intended to honor you, never intended to give you the love you gave so freely. That's the cost of staying. Time wasted on someone who already showed you who he was with his words long before his actions caught up. The third thing you lose is your identity. When you live in an environment where your feelings are constantly invalidated, you start to shrink yourself to survive. You stop speaking up as much. You stop dreaming as boldly. You stop being the vibrant version of yourself that existed before the relationship. You edit your personality to avoid conflict. You hide your needs because you've learned they'll be ignored anyway. You play small, not because you want to, but because it feels safer than being rejected again. And in the process, you forget who you are. The bright, independent, full of life person you used to be starts to fade until all that's left is a version of you shaped by his criticism and control. And the most dangerous cost of staying is this: you start to believe this is what love looks like. You start to normalize pain. You start to think that maybe this is just how relationships are supposed to feel. So when someone else comes along who treats you better, you don't even recognize it. You don't believe it. You push it away because you've been conditioned to accept less. That is the deepest wound a toxic relationship can leave, the way it rewires your definition of love. But here's the truth: staying doesn't save the relationship. It only saves his comfort. It keeps him from facing consequences. It allows him to keep using the same words, the same excuses, the same patterns without ever having to change. When you stay after the red flags, you are teaching him that there are no consequences for disrespect. And if there are no consequences, there will be no growth. Why would he change if he doesn't have to? Why would he stop dismissing you if dismissing you works? That's the harsh reality. Staying doesn't make him better. It just makes you smaller. The cost of staying is not just about what you lose today, it's about the future you sacrifice. The peace you could have, the love that could have been yours, the opportunities you never saw because you were too drained by the constant battles in your relationship. Every time you settle for disrespect, you are pushing away the possibility of the life you truly deserve. And when you realize that, it hits you. The real cost of staying is your future self, the version of you who could have been thriving, joyful, and free. Walking away is not easy. It hurts. It feels like failure. It feels like loss. But what you gain by leaving is far greater than what you lose. You gain your confidence back. You gain your time back. You gain your voice back. And most importantly, you give yourself the chance to experience love that doesn't come with conditions, disrespect, or control. A love that lifts you instead of diminishing you. So, when you're tempted to excuse toxic words, when you're tempted to stay because leaving feels too hard, I want you to ask yourself, what is this costing me? Not just today, not just tomorrow, but over the years if nothing changes. What parts of me will I lose? How much of my life will I waste? What will I look back on with regret? Because the price of staying is never cheap. It costs you everything that makes you who you are. And that is why the moment you recognize those red flags, the moment his words show you the truth, the strongest choice you can make is to leave. Not because you don't love him, because you love yourself more. Not because you want to give up, but because you refuse to give away your peace, your worth, and your future for someone who has already shown you he will not protect them. The cost of staying is your soul. The gift of leaving is freedom, and when you choose freedom, you open the door to a life where you are no longer surviving someone else's words. You are thriving in your own truth. There comes a moment in every person's life where the most powerful word you can ever speak is not yes or no, but enough. That word carries the weight of freedom. It's the word that signals to the world, and more importantly to yourself, that you will no longer tolerate less than what you deserve. Walking away is not weakness. Walking away is not running from love. Walking away is the loudest declaration of self-respect you will ever make. Too often, people confuse staying with strength. They think loyalty means tolerating disrespect. They believe that endurance proves love. But staying in a place where you are diminished, disregarded, or dishonored is not strength. It is self-betrayal. True strength comes in the courage it takes to walk away when everything in your heart wants to stay, when every memory pulls you back, when the fear of the unknown feels heavier than the pain you already know. Walking away takes more bravery than holding on because it demands faith. Faith that your life will be better without them. Faith that the future will heal the hurt. Faith that you are enough on your own. Walking away is not about proving him wrong. It's not about revenge or punishment. It's about proving yourself right, proving that your worth is not negotiable, that your boundaries matter, that your heart is too valuable to be handed to someone who doesn't know how to protect it. It's about stepping back into your own power and saying, I choose me. And when you make that choice, something remarkable happens. The fog begins to lift. The confusion, the excuses, the endless second guessing, it all starts to fade. You see the relationship for what it really was, not for what you wished it could have been. That clarity is the first gift of walking away, but the deeper gift comes later. When you walk away, you open up space in your life. At first, that space feels empty. It feels like loss. It feels like loneliness. But over time, that space becomes the very ground where you rebuild yourself. It becomes the room where your confidence grows again. It becomes the silence where your inner voice gets louder. It becomes the soil where joy, peace, and possibility begin to take root. Without leaving, you never would have had that space. You would have been too crowded by his words, his demands, his presence. Walking away is not just about losing him. It's about finding yourself again. Some people will try to convince you that leaving means giving up. They'll say, maybe you should have tried harder. Maybe you're walking away too soon. But only you know the truth of what you've endured. Only you know the nights you cried yourself to sleep, the mornings you woke up to the same disappointment, the moments you swallowed your voice to keep the peace. Only you know the way his words cut you down until you felt small. And so only you get to decide when enough is enough. Walking away isn't quitting, it's graduating. It's moving beyond a relationship that was never worthy of your heart in the first place. There's also a misconception that walking away leaves you empty, but the reality is it fills you with something far more important: dignity. Dignity is the quiet confidence that comes from honoring your own worth. It's the deep peace of knowing you didn't stay in a place that dishonored you. It's the glow people see on your face when you choose yourself unapologetically. And here's the beautiful irony: once you walk away, once you reclaim your dignity, you attract relationships that reflect that same energy. You stop settling for crumbs because you've tasted what it feels like to honor your whole worth. The power of walking away also lies in the message it sends to others, yes, but most importantly to yourself. When you walk away, you are teaching yourself a lesson you will carry forever. I am not afraid to be alone. I am not afraid to start over. I am not afraid to demand better. That lesson will echo in every decision you make afterward. It will shape your career, your friendships, your choices, your future relationships. Because once you know you are strong enough to leave what doesn't serve you, you will never again cling to what breaks you. And let's be clear, walking away does not mean you stop loving. Love doesn't just disappear overnight. You may still care it. You may still think of him. But love is not the only ingredient a relationship needs. Respect matters. Safety matters. Growth matters. And if those are missing, love alone cannot save it. Walking away doesn't erase the love, but it honors the lesson that love should never require you to sacrifice yourself. In time, you'll look back at the moment you walked away and realize it was the turning point. The day you chose your future over your fear. The day you stopped negotiating your worth. The day you stopped hoping someone would change and started creating change for yourself. It may not feel like strength in the moment. It may feel like heartbreak. But one day you'll look back and recognize it as the bravest decision you ever made. So when a man says the words that reveal his lack of respect, his disregard for your heart, his unwillingness to grow, remember this: you don't have to argue. You don't have to beg. You don't have to convince him to treat you better. You only have to make one choice. You only have to stand tall, gather your courage, and walk away. Because that one act says more than 1,000 conversations ever could. It says you value yourself. It says you refuse to live small. It says you are done carrying the cost of staying and ready to claim the freedom of leaving. The power of walking away is the power of reclaiming your life. It's the power to stop merely surviving and start thriving. It's the power to close the door on pain and open the door to possibility. And when you walk through that door, when you finally step into the life that's been waiting for you all along, you will discover something extraordinary. You were never really losing him. You were finding you. At the end of the day, The words a man speaks are not just words, they are windows into his soul. They show you whether he values you, whether he respects you, whether he is truly capable of loving you the way you deserve. And when those words reveal patterns of dismissal, disrespect, or control, you cannot afford to ignore them. Because every moment you excuse them, you are teaching him how to treat you and teaching yourself what you are willing to accept. You've heard the truth today. The excuses are endless. The manipulation is subtle. The erosion of your worth is slow, but the cost is always the same. Your peace, your confidence, your identity, your future. And that cost is far too high. But here's the hope: you are not powerless. You do not have to wait for him to change. You do not have to keep negotiating for love. You do not have to lose yourself trying to hold on to someone who has already shown you who he is. The power is in your hands. The power is in your choice. The power is in walking away. Walking away is not weakness, it is strength. It is the moment you reclaim your voice, your dignity, and your future. It is the moment you stop surviving on crumbs and start demanding the feast of love, respect, and peace you truly deserve. It is the moment you say, I will no longer settle. I will no longer shrink. I will no longer betray myself. So if a man says these things to you, if he reveals himself through words that wound instead of words that heal, do not hesitate. Do not rationalize. Do not wait for tomorrow to be different. Walk away immediately, confidently, unapologetically. Because when you walk away from the wrong man, you are walking toward the right life. And one day you will look back stronger, freer, and happier than ever. And you will realize leaving wasn't the end of your story. It was the beginning of the life you were always meant to live.